Imagine, first of all, if the sphere is one of the most powerful shapes in the universe because it is the nexus of the masculine and feminine, the yin and the yang, that divides into polarity. So that you have the sphere in that beautiful yin and yang shape with the little dot acknowledging that one becomes the other at some point. The sphere is the most graceful, the most excellent shape, which is why we make our wheels round, because it takes less energy to transport goods on a round wheel than on a triangular wheel. Now, round is this nexus of masculine and feminine energy, yin and yang, because it's one, which is the symbol of the unbroken whole, which is a mathematical equation, meaning every scientist and mathematician will say that there is a link between this color and every other color. There's a link between the gravitational field of this pinky and the gravitational field of Alpha Centauri, the gravitational field on Mars. There is a link between the breath that I'm breathing in and the trees that breathed it out. There is nothing in the known or unknown that is not inextricably linked to every other thing in some way. And that is the equation of the unbroken whole. That is the sphere. Now, the sphere represents the unity of all that is the oneness. It is one. But it is also infinite, because when a computer makes a sphere, it doesn't say one. It makes it out of a certain number of dots and by refracting a certain number of lines. And so in that way, the sphere is the one that is unconscious because its distinctions are infinite. You can make a sphere out of 1,000,000 dots, out of 1,000,000,000 dots, out of 1,000,000,000,000 dots, and you could still do 20 trillion dots. A sphere is an infinite number of dots. You just think of its surface. It's an infinite amount of space, because no matter how much you divide the space, you can always divide the space again and again and again and again. You take an inch and it's half an inch, and then you divide a quarter inch. It just goes endlessly. There is no limit to the amount of space. You're just marking, the perimeter. So the sphere is the infinite, and it is the one. And the way we build a sphere is, let's say a computer creates 1,000,000 dots and says, here's your sphere. It looks like one, but it's really 1,000,000 dots. If you can refract a sphere with an infinite number of lines, but we don't use an infinite number of lines because it's beyond our ability. So we create a sphere. Like even this chalk, if you look closely, this little bit has about 100 dots within it to make the sphere. Now, I don't say that's 100 dots. I say that's a sphere. But in subatomic particles, there's this same dance. Is it a sphere or is it a lot of dots? Which is it? It depends what lens you look through. Is it a particle or is it a wave? It depends on what apparatus does the physicist look through. And so the sphere plays with that duality. It's one and it's dual at the same time, depending on how you're looking at it. But we honor the sphere as the most excellent and intelligent shape, because if we took the round wheel and turned it into a triangle, well, what a relief, because now I can say 1, 2, 3. I can remember that. So it's nice for the conscious mind, as opposed to an infinite number of dots. But a triangle is a very violent thing to drive on. If you have 2 triangular bicycle wheels, it's very crude. You pretty much quickly get off the bike and start walking because it's such a violent ride. But it's so nice to think about. It's a nice system, isn't it? A triangle, 1, 2, 3, heart, mind, and body, right? It's simple. The heart, mind, body ecology is a sphere, and it is infinite. and it goes one into the other. You don't have thoughts without feelings. You don't have feelings without thoughts. You don't have action without feeling. You don't have action without thought. Thoughts change the body's chemistry. So it's an infinite sphere, but we like simple models for our limited consciousness. So we say heart, mind, and body function as one. So we like triangular systems. They're nice and simple, but they're violent because they don't capture the whole. There's a lot of waste created by the illusion of this. And what you see is system evolution evolves with consciousness. So as you go from a triangular system, it's good, it's evil, or it's undecided, let's say, into a more complex system where everything is good in this situation and everything is bad in this situation. It's much more complex, but it's harder to think about, so we don't like it. Simple minds like dogmas. But if you move towards complexity, one of the things you see is that the sphere gets stronger. This sphere could collapse here, it could collapse here quite easily. This one has fewer points where it could collapse. But it's also harder to think about. Now you have to remember 4 things. It's got more complex relationships. By the time you get to 5, you have a much stronger wheel if you had points all around. But if you get to a bicycle wheel with all those spokes, it's like, how do you know how many spokes are on a bicycle? It's too many to count, right? And that's when it starts to become unconscious. I don't know how many squares, but I can count and remember a 5-pointed star. The relationships get more complex. So the system, the whole that we are a part of, can be broken into infinite distinctions. And as we move towards complexity, we become unconscious because we can't hold infinite distinctions inside the human brain. So we have a process of evolution where complexity leads to plus intelligence leads to grace, elegance, excellence, which leads to ease and leads to well-being. But it's hard on a limited consciousness that can only remember a few things. And so the most graceful systems are the most intelligently complex systems that are incredibly easy. Think nature. It's just winning billions after billions of years, creating new. Nature is designed to win, and it is highly complex. But it's also, you and I don't know hardly anything about nature. It's just too complex. I don't know how much oxygen that I'm breathing is coming from the bay trees outside versus the redwoods versus the ferns versus blown in from the neighborhood. I have no idea. It's just too complex, so it's unconscious. What I know are very simple things like how long my battery lasts on my phone, right? Very simple compared to the complexity of nature. But it's also everything that a human being does is less sustainable and less intelligent than what nature does at this level of consciousness. Meaning, as a general rule, if you deleted all human beings from the planet and waited 500 years, nature would have a more intelligent balance in place and would be more sustainable, statistically speaking, than if we waited 500 years and had the same or more people on the planet. In other words, nature is more intelligent at creating sustainable well-being per unit of energy invested and has a guaranteed winning game. Because nature produces new distinctions, new anomalies every single year and tests them out. And some of them win. We were one of the winners. And in one of the odd things where that which is created destroys its creator, one of the interesting phenomena, particularly when you think of that which is created changes the creator, which means that the creator no longer exists as they were before. Now there's a new rendition, a new iteration. All things affect one another. There's not just one-way impact. So anyway, there's a direction towards grace as we get more and more complex, which is fought by the fear of a traumatized culture into going into chaos, into the unknown, and into mystery. Because if we can only remember 12 to 30-point systems with any ease, and nature is a trillion upon trillion upon trillion system, well, the only way to interact with nature with the conscious mind of a human is through mystery and wonder at the unknown. But to do that, you have to be friendly with the femininity that the unknown, that mystery, that complexity represent. And a chauvinistic cult is formed out of terror of the unknown, from sustained cruelty towards the feminine in men and in women, which is why the masculine identities in a chauvinistic cult in men and women are high-ranking. For example, a Margaret Thatcher can lead Great Britain for a period of time because she was more masculine, more chauvinistic, more dominant, more assertive, more stubborn, more focused, more aggressive than most men. So fine, if you're a woman who adopts high masculine traits, you can run the country. But we won't elect you if you're spontaneous, if you're emotional, if you're artistic, if you're playful, if you're warm, if you're empathic, if you're nurturing. We won't elect you. Because we're chauvinistic, we believe that survival is accentuated, is amplified by the masculine trait dominating, which is why we won't elect sensitive men either. Well, you know, the science can do the data about the actual impact of masculinity and femininity, but cults are not scientific, they're traditional. They want something known because they're afraid of the unknown, because the last time they were torn to shreds in their life was because something took them by surprise and it made them feel helpless. So, in conclusion, the identities that dominate the planet today are the identities that the cults that surround those identities reward with survival, security, love and belonging, self-esteem, etc. The majority has never been correct in the sense of occupying the most intelligent position on the planet at any given point. By many metrics, Western culture is among the least intelligent cultures in the sense that it consumes more energy per capita than almost any cult, if not any cult out of 10,000 in human history, at an unsustainable rate while creating simultaneously high levels of subjective and objective misery for its inhabitants. And that the options for you as an individual are to dissociate from human beings and live in a more virtual world. This is one of the things that YouTube and things like this creates. Meaning, like, you could be surrounded by brutish, stubborn, cruel addicts with headphones on, listening to this and seeing something blossom in you that would never blossom while you were getting a beating at home. And that's the freedom of the virtual world, that one can create a virtual environment, picking and choosing sources of stimulation and validation and hope, and that encourage your survival, your security, your love and belonging, your self-esteem, etc., from the outside of your immediate environment, thus liberating you to sustain identities that your community would kill off if you gave it the chance. So this is the freedom of books, the freedom of time travel, the freedom of meditation, the freedom of imagination, the freedom of media. You must, if you want to develop some part of yourself, you must find an environment that rewards it. That can be a virtual environment, that can be an imaginary environment, that can be, a religious environment, praying to God, whatever, goddess, whatever it is. You have to have an environment that is bigger than you, feeding and nourishing the identity that you want to sustain. If you do not have that, you cannot use willpower to sustain it anyways. You must break orbit from known reality and use willpower in that strong burst of breaking the gravitational pull of the known to get off and come back to another identity. And as an example, in the United States, I found that my intellect could be nourished and my heart could not. Now, that's just what I found personally. And I wanted my heart to be nourished. And so I did something very uncomfortable. I didn't know if I could tolerate an 18-hour plane flight. I'd never done anything like that. I'd been on an 8-hour plane flight, and that was tough. So I didn't know if I could tolerate 18 hours. But I'd traveled around Europe enough to know that I wasn't going to find what I was looking for in Europe or the United States. My one hope was that in Bali, Thailand, or the Philippines, there might be enough of a different culture where my feminine side, where my emotional side, where my playful side and spontaneous side would be nurtured enough to blossom. My 2-week venture to the Philippines proved two things. I could survive the flight, and I was in the right direction. My next trip to Thailand blew the door open. I was 300% happier emotionally within an hour of arriving and felt that way ever since. So pivoting my life to be able to spend 4 months, 6 months, 7 months of the year in Thailand was a way of validating that a part of me that made no money, that spent money actually, that made no money, that had to travel 18 hours in plane to get there, that didn't speak my language, was very different in all respects, but that honored and cherished my emotional self 3 to 10 times more than my country. That if I wanted to experience that me, I had to spend time there in a garden that would grow that particular plant. And less time here with temperatures that would freeze that plant into dissociation or traumatic death, was an example of using will and a lot of energy and creativity, etc., to move part of me over there to give birth to that. And then honor that and understand I like the me that I am here more than I like the me that I am here. But I can do things here to break orbit once or twice a year, 3 times a year, 4 times a year, to head over there and watch that part grow. And then watch it wither again when I come back, and then watch it grow again before it dies off, and watch it wither again and watch it grow again. It requires the creation of an environment, and one of the most significant possible intelligence expressions, which I've explored if you look at the website 10xliving.org, is the opportunity to create a microculture within the larger culture that is 10 times more intelligent and nurturing than the exterior culture in terms of taking 1/3 as much energy, time, money, and natural resources to create 10 times more sustainable well-being.